In the pine forests near Blackroot Valley, people stopped searching long ago for those taken by what locals later called Marrowborn. None of them were ever brought back whole. The stories say the forest always changed first. The air grew damp and heavy. Birds stopped, and the path ahead felt wrong before Marrowborn was ever mentioned. People who entered Blackroot after disappearances said the smell stayed the same: wet soil, old bark, and a faint rot that did not belong to any animal. Over the years, a few bodies were found along the same trails, lying still, with no signs of struggle, yet shaped in ways that made people stop looking closer. Hunters from nearby villages said the worst moment was not seeing but realizing the forest itself had gone silent, as if something inside it was listening, long before anyone dared speak its name openly. People around Blackroot passed down one rule: when the forest grows to quiet at night, leave before Marrowborn remembers you. People eventually began calling it Marrowborn, not for its shape, but for where it was believed to come from, the deepest part of bone, where life is formed and never meant to return. In most stories, Marrowborn is described as female in form, tall and thin, with skin the color of dead bark, standing still as if placed rather than arrived. The swollen belly is always mentioned, not moving correctly, sometimes still for long moments, then tightening slightly, as if what it carried was trying to remember how to live. Those who stared too long said its face became visible only with time: sunken white eyes, no pupils, and a mouth stretched and cracked like old, dried wood. When Marrowborn opens its mouth, no words come out, only breath mixed with a creaking sound, like trees bending slowly under weight that should not exist. What it is has never been agreed upon, but people say it represents life denied, carried forward when it should have ended, and left to rest. In northern regions, Marrowborn is tied to deep forests, while farther east, similar figures are said to appear near burial grounds where unborn remains were left untreated. Across cultures, the fear remains the same: not that it kills, but that it carries something unfinished, and that once chosen, it does not let go. I learned about Marrowborn through regional warnings, passed differently in each place, but always treated as practical knowledge rather than stories meant to scare children. In Northern Europe, especially areas tied to old pine forests, people avoid speaking its name near woodland paths, not out of fear, but to prevent fixing a location in memory. In parts of Eastern Europe, Marrowborn is mentioned only after leaving the forest, because locals believe speaking of it inside marks the speaker as unfinished business. In rural areas of East Asia, similar figures are warned against by telling travelers never to acknowledge a pregnant woman who stands without moving or shifting weight. Southern traditions focus on physical direction, advising travelers to retreat the same way they entered, never passing in front of the figure, even if the path becomes blocked. Across all regions, the shared belief remains consistent. Rules are not meant to save lives, only to delay recognition long enough to leave unnoticed. One account often repeated comes from a logging area near where a young man went missing overnight and was later found seated against a tree, body intact, expression described as vacant. Older villagers insisted the body showed no signs of struggle, yet the ground beneath him was deeply compressed, as if something heavy had remained there for a long time. In Eastern Europe, a similar story speaks of a woman who entered a forest path alone and returned days later, alive, but with a swollen abdomen and severe physical decline. She was kept under watch until her death months later, and those present said nothing was ever born, yet her body never returned to its former state. Farther east, hunters spoke of a trail where people vanished, followed by the growth of a new tree, bent forward, its bark marked with patterns resembling ribs. These trees were never cut down, not because of law, but because those who tried said the forest became unbearably still afterward. A small number of people were said to escape, but all descriptions agree they returned altered, withdrawn, and unable to explain what they carried away. No written record confirms these events. Yet the consistency across regions is what caused Marrowborn to be blamed whenever such patterns appeared again. Over time, people said Marrowborn was not meant to explain death, but to remind communities that some acts are never finished simply because they are ignored. In many regions, the legend is told after incidents involving abandonment, denial, or secrecy as a way to give shape to consequences that could not be openly discussed. Elders said the story endures because it connects personal guilt to a shared place, turning forests and paths into reminders rather than sources of comfort. Marrowborn is remembered not as punishment, but as persistence, a sign that what is denied does not disappear, but waits to be carried forward. Even now, people say Marrowborn does not hunt to kill, only to continue what was left unfinished, carrying it forward until someone finally remembers it should have ended. If such a figure ever stands in your path, people say the danger is not what you see, but what the forest has already decided you will carry away. I have heard similar warnings from different regions, told with different words, yet always followed by the same silence when no one wants to ask more. If you have heard a story like this before, or know a place where such rules exist, people say sharing it keeps others from being chosen unnoticed. And if you choose to stay and listen to more accounts like this, remember that subscribing is not curiosity, but a way to keep these warnings from disappearing.